conversation series. Matt Perrin, Director of Caregiver Engagement here at Carallel, back with you. And excited to be talking about dementia today. We talk about dementia quite a bit on this in this series for good reason. And of course, it's if you've been on one of these sessions before, you know it's a topic near and dear to my heart, having spent over 8 years caring for my mom and father-in-law who were living with Alzheimer's disease and Lewy body dementia, respectively. But today, the lens we're talking about dementia today through is understanding it's every dementia caregiving experience is utterly unique to that person, that family, but there are some common threads. And one of those common threads are at some point as a dementia caregiver, we find ourselves in challenging situations, faced with challenging behaviors being exhibited from our loved one, etc. So those are what we're talking about today, those situations. And I get so lucky with the guests on these shows. Really happy to be joined by Sheila Schultz, my colleague and friend. Hey, Sheila.
Hey, Matt, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Great. Glad to be here today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, or thanks for being here, rather. I'm having you. What am I saying? So, Sheila, maybe her face is familiar. She's joined me on a couple of these sessions in the past. She's a care advocate here at Carallel and also a certified dementia practitioner. So psyched you could join us, Sheila. Thanks again. We have, per usual, just a little bit of housekeeping before we jump in. First and foremost, if you're new here, welcome. We're Carallel. We're a caregiver support company. So we support, guide, and assist family caregivers in a couple of different ways. First and foremost with our support line, which is staffed by Sheila and a number of her colleagues, other care advocates here at Carallel. And they're there to help family caregivers with whatever's on their plate on a given day, week, month, etc. And we complement that one-on-one personalized support from the support line with our digital experience, which is My Care Desk, available 24/7. I think of it as a one-stop encyclopedia for all things caregiving, available 24/7 in a web browser. So, and we make our service available across the country through health plans and employers who offer it as either a health plan benefit or an employee benefit. So if you're not sure whether or not you have access to Carallel, ask your health plan or ask your employer. Or you can respond to your invite and ask me. I can let you know. But that's housekeeping number one. Number two, more important, is these are conversations by design. So we'd love you to be a part of it. If you have questions, perspectives to share, comments, anything at all, you can share using the chat or the chat icon down in the bottom of your Zoom console. I think that's all the housekeeping. Sheila, did I miss anything? Keep me honest.
I think you've got it.
All right, great. So let's jump in. Now, as usual, we're focused on trying to be as practical as possible on these sessions. So today, what that means is, first and foremost, level setting on sort of, what's happening when there's a challenging behavior that our loved one is showing us. The second is really diving into sort of some tips that we can use to navigate those situations, and that's really our focus today. So that's what practical looks like in this particular session. And Sheila, to start, I wanted to just ask you a question, because I in the moment it's hard to it's hard for me anyway to remember this, but what's happening when our loved one is exhibiting some sort of challenging behavior? Like what is it a choice? Are they making a choice?
Well, in a word, no, they're not making a choice. And, Matt, one of the things that I learned that I thought was a really great way of thinking of it is I don't think we realize how amazing our brains are and how much our brains work at getting simple tasks done. So even if we looked at something super simple, like let's put a shoe on, that takes hundreds of steps in our minds, hundreds and hundreds of steps. So when someone with dementia is faced with something as simple as putting on a shoe, And one of those steps is interrupted by the disease, they can't complete it. So it seems so simple to us, but as far as they're concerned, they might be just as surprised as we are that they can't do that. I think it's a good way to kind of frame that as you see somebody, you're like, why can't they just do this one thing? And they said they would. So,
Yeah,
no, they can't
I,
control it.
right. Thank you. Somewhat of a setup question there, but I think it's an important one because, like I said, when I was teeing it up, it's in the moment. It's hard. It's hard to see it that way, right? And I sort of told myself a simplified version of that, thanks to lots of help, from other people who've been through it, support groups, professionals who I was talking with. But the brain is changing, like that's the bottom line. And so that almost turned into, a little bit of, I guess, a mantra for me that I could use in those in those moments. And there were a lot of them, and the stuff, the sort of examples that we picked out here today, Sheila, I think you'd agree, are sort of, it's not meant in any way to be an exhaustive list, right? They're some common examples of challenging behaviors or situations. But they are challenging, right? And if I'm assuming people that are joining the conversation today are in some way they're either in the middle of a dementia caregiving experience, or maybe they're being proactive for the future or what have you. But if you are in the middle, you're probably already experiencing these. And so it's not necessarily that the stuff we're talking about, Sheila, is maybe new, but it's an opportunity, like reminders, refreshers. They're all really, really important as we're sort of in the midst of this journey, because that's really what it is. It's a long-term sort of cycle. Okay, so what do you say we jump into some of the common ones? And these are in no particular order. And I say that because I didn't really experience this first sort of example until quite a while into my journey, probably the 6th or 7th inning, I would say, if I draw a parallel to baseball. But agitation and aggression, and those. So I guess, and I'm lumping two things together there for the purpose of this conversation. And in my case, we had more agitation and less aggression, but that was just our case. But like, what's happening when our loved ones sort of agitated and maybe acting aggressively? Like, what's
Yeah,
going on there?
well, I think that if this might be the one that we can most relate to, not having dementia, perhaps. And think about what happens when you're overtired, or you're really stressed out, or you're frustrated or confused or scared. In any of those situations, we can get agitated and we can get aggressive. We're responding to a situation. So to me, that's what's happening here, is that we want to look for signs that maybe they're tired. Certainly they're frustrated based on what I mentioned earlier. They may not realize why they're doing things. It's just as strange to them as it is to us. So just imagine what that must be like, and how frustrating and scary. So that's kind of my overview of what I've seen or what I've learned about when it comes to being agitated or even aggressive.
I appreciate that. And you use the word frustration, which we'll probably use quite a bit today. But I in particular, if I zoomed in on that a little bit in my own experience, just reflecting, one of the biggest sources for frustration in both my mother and my father-in-law's case, and it was slightly different because my mother-in-law was living in a memory care community and my father-in-law was in our home. So I saw my father-in-law more, but they both had communication challenges, and they were, and ultimately at a certain point weren't able to communicate verbally. but that was the first for us, for our family anyway. The communication was that first sort of trigger, I guess, of frustration. Um, so, and maybe that's a good segue to some of the tips.
Sure.
But it took, like, we didn't know that. I guess the last point I want to make is it's not like when you're in the middle of all of this, it's not like I was like, oh, geez, mom's can't find a word that you like to communicate that she needs something or wants something or has a thought she wanted to share. Like, it's not so simple, right? There's no, these light bulb moments don't exist, or they didn't for me anyway. So, that's why we're talking about them in conversations like these. But communication was definitely a trigger, I guess, for the frustration in our family. But what are some other tips? I'd imagine trying to identify those triggers would be
Yeah.
one.
For sure. Yeah. Trying to identify them. And I think we're going to see an overarching theme throughout all of these behaviors is that we want to get to the root cause. We want to try to figure out why they're acting or saying what they are, not listening to what they're saying or watching what they're doing, but really trying to see the feelings that they're emoting and not being able to communicate in a way that we understand. So I think it's important to always be, create a calm environment, really get down on their level, make sure they feel soothed and comfortable and secure and safe. That's at the heart of so much of this is not listening to what they're saying or to try to translate it as much as like, how are they feeling?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot there to unpack. So, and it makes sense the way to hear you describe it so succinctly. One of the things that I had a thought as you were talking, when the triggers don't necessarily stay stagnant, right? They change. So, like, if I'm using communication as an example, right? So, when when my mom and father-in-law were still verbal, like, it was almost there was no light bulb moment, as I was saying, but like we could see that they were trying to communicate,
Yeah.
and that was a clue. But when they weren't verbal, like, verbal communication is just one channel of communication, right? So there were other ways that they were communicating, and you used the word emoting, right? So that's number one. Number two was what we thought was a calming environment at times wasn't always a calming environment for them where
Right,
they were
right,
at that point in time.
right.
Right. So it just, it was, like, for instance, it took us, we had a opposite of linear route to figuring out that a fidget blanket or fidget, like a fidget washcloth with things that my father-in-law could have in his hands and be feeling and touching, and that was calming, right? But
Yep.
we had to figure it out by the fact that he loved playing with the newspaper, and
Yeah.
then we at a certain point we didn't want him to be thinking he would, it was food and putting it in his mouth, or so we tried to get a safer alternative for that, right? So anyway, it's just none of it's stagnant is the main point
Yeah.
that I wanted to, I had flowing into my head as you're talking. So
Absolutely. One thing just wanted to mention, Matt, is that you keep bringing the light bulb moments up, and it reminds me that one thing I heard, which is so beautiful, is that when you're saying something's not stagnant, things change every day, and what worked yesterday may not work today. Well, if you think of a loose light bulb, it sometimes works, it sometimes doesn't. And that's every time that you get frustrated, like, they just had this yesterday and now they don't. Think of that loose light bulb. It's just not working right now. It might come back, it might not. But that really helps me too, and helps a lot of people to sort of settle into, all right, it's just the loose light bulb thing.
right. um Okay, so let's time flies when we're having fun, as I always say here. So the next behavior is wandering. Like, what's happening sort of behind the scenes there if someone's wandering, or beginning to, and what are some what are some of the things that we as caregivers can do sort of navigate that.
Well, I think some of the things we talked about earlier, the agitation, being restless. But I also think that what I've noticed is that sometimes they're looking for something in their past. They're looking for their brother. They're looking for something that they had 20 years ago. Other times it's just a matter of them not remembering that you said, stay here or stay in the house, or it's time for bed. And, they're going off into a different direction, looking for something. And the last thing that I thought of is, if they're not familiar with where they are as being their home, oftentimes they're looking to get home. And so that's a real trigger for people. It's something that I see an awful lot, is trying to get home.
Right. Okay, well, thank you for that. And then tips for managing, implementing safety measures, locks on doors,
Yep.
alarms, GPS tracking. Wandering is just really, really hard. And, I'm thinking of these things, and for me anyway, these are all really emotional sort of interventions, because I know how at the core my mom or my father-in-law's or just any person's independence is, right? So but those are the interventions, right? That we have available to us.
Yeah, and I would
And
just add one more quick thing, Matt, is that if you might be saying, oh, my loved one doesn't wander right now. But keep in mind, just keep an eye on things, because if they start saying things like, I need to get to work, I need to go shopping, those are indications that they might start wandering. So just keep a close eye.
I love that. Sheila. Thanks for mentioning it, because there is a balancing act we do between looking forward and you don't want to get carried away and you want to stay in the moment, but there are instances where it behooves us to be maybe looking one or two steps ahead, and that's definitely one of them. We had a comment from one of the attendees here on communication, really, and she says, I asked my mother if she's in pain or experiencing discomfort. If she answers yes, I asked her to point out the area of her body where it hurts, where she's experiencing the issues. And I wish I thought of that. I think it's great, and just to me a really nice example of a caregiver's sort of ingenuity in their own experience. And I thank you for sharing.
Yeah, and that body language is an awful lot to point to hold yourself. Is it here? Is it here? That's wonderful.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so this next one was one that I just saying the words, really, I could feel it, but and it's the repetitive behaviors, right? And this was the first, what I would say, challenging behavior that I saw. Maybe it is for other people, but what's happening with the repetitive behaviors, and how can we manage or sort of navigate those, Sheila?
I think the obvious one is they're forgetting. They forgot that they just asked you that, or they forgot that they just did that. But I think, once again, getting back to their feelings of comfort and security, most of the time that I've seen is they're not really looking for an answer to their question. They're trying to communicate to you that they're scared, or they're not feeling comfortable. So if they say today is Monday, they're not looking for the answer, yes, today's Monday. What you could say is, everything's great. We're gonna be fine today. Don't you feel warm and comfortable? It's about shifting it to comfort and security, rather than focusing on what they're saying and answering every time, because that'll get frustrating for you too, to keep doing that. But it's about really going to that underlying thing and making sure they feel safe and comfortable and calm.
Yeah, the way you were emoting there when you were talking about it reminded me of I got this piece of advice at some point along the way in my experience, and I was told to, regardless of how I was feeling in that moment, whether I felt good and rested or tired and had a cold or just in a bad mood, regardless of how I was feeling, she told me to bring sunshine from my shoes. And her whole point was like, and she was literally trying to show me, as you need to, like, your body language when you're communicating is really important. And at the time I was dismissive and like, anyway, I have vivid memories of Monica was her name, telling me this and trying to get me, like, she was putting everything into trying to get me to see that. But the difference it makes, to your point,
Yeah.
is phenomenal.
Mhm.
Even if behind that thin veneer of sunshine, I felt like anything but, right. But
Yeah.
it really was helpful. And that's a good example of like the type of advice that at the beginning of my journey, I would have just kind of shrugged. I don't need to. I don't need to do
I've got
that.
things to do.
Yeah,
I can't be worried about that. Yeah.
exactly,
Makes a
exactly.
difference.
So, just a side note there. Okay, and uh, another one that is a loaded situation, but sundowning. And
Yeah.
sundowning, I think of it anyway. This is just me, but I think of it as more of a situation that can sort of be an incubator for a lot of the stuff that we've already talked about, right? Agitation,
Mhm.
maybe even aggression, wandering at some cases. In my mom's
Mhm.
case, it was pacing. Right? When she was
Mhm.
sundowning, it was, she would just wear out the carpet. Um, and but what is sundowning? Maybe let's start there. And what I think there's what well, let's high level, what is it, and how can we, what are some ideas, some fresh perspectives on how we might be able to make that part of a day a little bit easier as a
Yeah.
caregiver.
Well, it's something that happens late in the day or early evening, and it's a sense of confusion or anxiety that creeps in at a certain time of day. And there can be so many reasons for it. One of the things we didn't mention earlier is side effects from drugs. So it's always important when you see anything of a behavior that, you might think about that and talk to your doctor. Is this a possible side effect? But I think the other thing is it could be pain, it could be them trying to communicate, it could be a lot of the things that are tied to the other behaviors. Overstimulation. So once again, we're trying to make a calm environment. We're trying to, go gently and move slowly. It could be their vision or their hearing is not great. And then when it gets dark, it's even scarier. So there are so many possible reasons for it. And it's a matter of, once again, trying to keep them calm, trying to get to the root of the problem. Is there pain? Is there fear? And addressing it in whatever way you can to make a calm and gentle environment.
Yeah. Really important point, Sheila, on talking with the doctor
Yeah.
when any of these things, and when anything new is happening, right? If it's the first time that your loved one is exhibiting a certain behavior, it's I'm just really glad you mentioned talking with the doctor.
Sure.
So thank you for that. And I mean, look at this. Our timing is, dare I say, nearly impeccable today. But the last behavior we had was sort of and it's more than a behavior, right? But hallucinations and or delusions in a dementia context. What should people know about these? I have some thoughts, but what would you tell people about hallucinations and delusions?
Well, I guess, first of all, the distinguishing factor is that hallucinations are more, think of hallucinations as feelings, as sensories. Someone's pulling my hair. I see someone in my room. That's a hallucination. Delusion is more like you're stealing my money. That kind of thing. And so that's more of a thought, whereas the hallucination is a feeling. And there could be various reasons for it. The hallucinations could be from some physical problem, a UTI, a fever, any kind of pain that they're in. So I want to go to you, Matt, to see your perspective on those two.
No, I was gonna just draw the line of delineation that you did, and you know, my mom was a nurse for 37 years, and until the last 6 months of her life, she would tell me regularly that, you know, she had to be on the floor today, and you know, they pulled her in, they needed her help, they needed someone to cover a shift. You know, and I simplified this as well. You know, to me, you know, one of the best lessons I ever learned was leaning into that reality, as long as it was safe to do so. You know, as long as my mom wasn't in danger, or my father-in-law wasn't in danger, or anyone else wasn't, like, lean into it. And that made our life just markedly better, honestly, because you know, my initial reflex was to contradict. That's not true. That's not right. Mom, you haven't been a nurse for 20 years, you know,
Right.
that sort of thing.
Agree wholeheartedly. And go ahead, Matt.
It was just uncomfortable to do, but once you do it and you get the hang of it, it almost becomes second nature, and quality of life, the quality of our time together improved as a result of that.
And I think the more calm you are, and the more you, like you said, lean into that, the calmer they get. They really do reflect your sense of your emotions, and so it is about responding to their feeling, maybe even helping them. Say, "Oh my gosh, someone took your keys. I'll help you go look for them." That kind of thing.
I love it. Yes. The hardest one, and you know, so my mom did have bouts of thinking that I was stealing from her.
Sure.
And that was difficult. But you know, I had an extra bag, right? When you know, she again lived in a community, she would often think that someone took her purse, as one example, right? So I had literally 3 different purses in my car at one point that I would pull out as needed.
That's
to sort
so
of
good, Matt.
distract.
That's so good. Like, keep an extra set of keys, keep extra sunglasses, whatever they keep losing or think someone's taking. Oh, here they are. Here it is.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
exactly. So now we're off time, but there's another question. And I want to get to final thoughts. So can you, Sheila, just repeat the sort of line of delineation between hallucinations and delusions one more time?
Yeah. If you think of a hallucination, it's, I feel something, and I see something, I feel something, someone is tugging at me. It's a feeling. Whereas the delusion is, hey, I think someone got into my bank account last week. So that's more of a thought, or you're wondering, you get paranoid. It's not like someone is touching you or something is bothering your body. That's how I think of it.
Got it. Okay. And question asker, send me an email, respond to your invite if you have further questions on that. Happy to talk further. So we're gonna just move to a final thought, Sheila. Before I do that, though, just wanted to mention that our next session will be the 21st of March, and we're going to be talking about everything a caregiver needs to know about creating an emergency plan. So noon Eastern, 21st of March, and you can register for that at the link that I just dropped into the chat. Everybody should see it. So Sheila, thank you so much for this.
You're welcome.
Fun as always to have you join me. What do you have a final thought for the audience?
I think just the things that we talked about in the very beginning, know that, you know, have a sense that this is not in their control. Don't worry, your emotions are going to pop up. That's completely normal. But now that you know some of these tips and reasons behind things, you want to focus on their feelings rather than on their behaviors. And then you just do the best you can. You know, this is the hardest thing ever, and you're doing the best you can.
Yeah, so we didn't even plan that, but that's a segue to my final thought, which is you're doing amazing.
Yeah.
Keep going, keep doing it. You're doing an amazing job. So with that, we'll wrap. Sheila, thanks again. everyone
You're
that
welcome.
was able to attend. Thanks for being here. And I hope to see you in March. But thanks and have a great day.
Take care.